B is a little bit harder. Now this is a quadratic inequality. Now if this was just equal to 0, what you'd want to do is you'd want to factorise this first. Okay, and this is something we can factorise, albeit quite a difficult expression to factorise, but we can factorise the 3x squared plus 8x minus 3. Now 3 is a prime number, so to make the 3x squared, the only option I've got is to have a 3x and an x. Okay, so what is quite a bit harder when you've got a coefficient of x squared that's not 1. If it's a prime number, it's still not too hard to deal with because you're going to have only 2 options to make that 3 in this case. So we choose 3x and x because if you times them together when you expand your brackets out, you will get 3x squared. Now we need to think about how we'd make the minus 3. Yeah, again, 3 is a prime number, so your only options would be 3 times 1. The only thing to decide is which bracket does each number go in, and in terms of the signs, what do we need to do? Well, we need to make a negative 3, so one of the numbers has to be positive and one of them has to be negative. Then just by trial and error, try with different combinations until you can make the plus 8x. So if I put plus 3 here and I put minus 1 here, 3x times 3 gives me 9x, x times minus 1 gives me minus x, so in total I have 8x. If you're not confident with factorising, make sure you do get into the habit of expanding those brackets out and checking that it works. Okay, even if you're quite confident with factorising, you know, it can be quite easy to make a mistake sometimes, so expand those brackets out and check. So now all that has to be less than 0. Next thing I want to do is find my critical values. Now the critical values are what values of x would you sub in here to make the whole expression equal 0 here on the left hand side. Okay, so it's a bit like when you've solved a quadratic equation before, you've got your 2 brackets there and it's equal to 0, and you need to figure out what do I need to put as x to make each bracket equal 0, because obviously if one of these brackets equals 0, then it doesn't matter what's in here, anything times 0 will just give you 0 overall. So in the first bracket, if x is a third, then 3 times a third is 1, take away 1 is 0. If you're not sure how to get x to the third, just set up an equation, 3x minus 1 equals 0, rearrange it to find that x indeed is a third. And your other critical value, this one's a little bit easier to spot, it's just going to be x equals minus 3, because if x is minus 3, doesn't matter what's in this left hand bracket, this right hand bracket will just be 0. So once I've got these critical values, the next thing I want to do is to do a sketch of the graph. Okay, so I've got minus 3 here and I've got a third here. These are my critical values. Also, if I was to plot the curve y equals 3x squared plus 8x minus 3, these would be my roots. Now because it's positive x squared here, it's just a U shape, or a happy graph as some of you know it as. And because I'm solving this inequality for less than 0, I'm looking at all the values that are less than 0 are solutions. So it turns out that everything between minus 3 and a third is a solution. I'll just write it like this. Okay, this means that x is bigger than minus 3, but it's less than a third, so it's bounded between minus 3 and a third. Okay, so make sure you take care of how you write that inequality at the end. Okay, a bit of coordinate geometry now. So we've got a straight line L1 that passes through the points minus 1, 3 and 11, 12. And we're going to find an equation for L in the form ax plus by plus c equals 0, where a, b and c all need to be integers. Now I think a lot of people did make quite a good start this question. Generally this actually was one of the better answered questions on the assessment, which was pleasing. Now we want to find a line, and we know 2 points. Okay, now to find the equation of a line, I need a point. Well, I've got that. In fact, I've actually got 2, so I'm fine for finding a point. But what I don't have at the moment is a gradient. Okay, so to write the equation of a straight line, I need a gradient and a point. I have a point, but I don't have a gradient. But I can find the gradient because I'm given 2 points, thankfully, in the question. So the gradient is the change in y divided by the change in x. So if you know 2 values, x1, y1 and x2, y2, then it's just y2 take away y1, that's your change in y, divided by x2 take away x1, that's your change in x. The common mistake people made was to get these two the wrong way round. Okay, so make sure it's your change in y on top and your change in x on the bottom. So y2 is 12, okay, that's the second value of y, and I do the second value of y, take away the first value of y, so it's 12 take away 3, and then looking at my x values, it's going to be x minus 1, okay, so careful with that, 11 minus 1, so on top I've got 12 minus 3, on bottom 11 minus 1 just becomes 12, okay, 2 negatives there making a positive. You were okay to leave that as 9 over 12 because that is the gradient, but you can make life simpler for yourself and cancel it down to 3 over 4. So now I have a gradient of 3 over 4. Let's write that on this page here. So I found my gradient is 3 over 4. So now I'm going to use the formula. Okay, I'm going to use the formula for finding the equation of a straight line. And I'm just going to pick the first point that was given as my x1 and y1, okay, but you could pick the 11, 12 if you wanted to. So I keep y as it is. y1 is just 3. M, well, that's the gradient, that's our 3 over 4 that we found out previously. X1 is just minus 1, so because it's x minus x1, our two minuses become a positive, and left with the following. Times everything by a 4. And we'll get rid of the fraction there. Okay, so I have to make sure I times every term by the 4. Expand that bracket out. I'm nearly there. All I need to do is just make sure it's in the form ax plus by plus c equals 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm taking 4y from both sides, and I'm also going to add 12 to both sides. Leaves me with that. If you had 4y minus 3x minus 15, that's absolutely acceptable. They're both the same thing, but just make sure that a, b and c are all integers, and it's in that form ax plus by plus c. So we're not looking for y equals mx plus c in this case. Okay, so looking at the second part of this question now, got 3x minus 4y plus 15 equals 0 for our L1, and we've got 3y plus 4x minus 30 equals 0 as our L2. Okay, so we've got our L1 here, and we've also got our L2. So we just found what L1 is, and we're told that L2 is 3y plus 4x minus 30 equals 0. Now what I need to do is find the coordinates of the point of intersection of L1 and L2. Now when I'm looking at lines or lines and curves meeting, I should be thinking I need to solve these simultaneously. Okay, so when I want to see where these two lines meet, I'm going to solve them simultaneously. So I'm just going to write out L2 underneath here. So 4x plus 3y minus 30 equals 0. Okay, I've not changed L2 too dramatically. All I've done is just swap the 4x and 3y over, keeping their same sign, so still both positive. And all I've done is just line it up with the x's, so just looks a bit clearer for you. Then what I'm going to do is I want to eliminate either x or y, so I can find out what the x value is and then sub it into y, or vice versa. Now, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a little bit more rearranging. I'm just going to make 3x minus 4y equal minus 15, and I'm also going to have 4x plus 3y equals 30. Now what I need to do is make sure I've got the same number of x's or the same number of y's. So let's look at solving this for having the same number of x's and eliminating them. So if I times the first equation by 4 and the second one by 3, let's see what happens. So if I times the first one by 4, so remember I have to times all these terms by 4, otherwise your equation will no longer balance. And then on the bottom here, times everything by a 3. Okay, now I'm able to eliminate my y's. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually rewrite the first equation here on the top, because it's going to make it a little bit easier for me to deal with. So I'm just swapping the two over. Okay, and then what I'll do is just going to take this bottom equation here away from the top one. Okay, so if I do 12x, take away 12x, gets rid of my x's. 9 minus 16 will give me 25y. And then 90 minus 60 is 150. Divide both sides by 25 and you'll get the y is 6. Now you might took some other approach to solve them simultaneously, but that's just one way we could do it. So all we need to do now is just plug, that should say when there, that's not very clear, I apologise. When y is 6, let's just plug it into L2 there. So when y is 6, well 3 times 6 is 18, plus 4x equals, 18 plus 4x minus 30 equals 0. So all I've done is just substituted y into L2, and then if I substitute y in, that's 3 times 6 for 18. After some rearranging, adding 30 to both sides, taking 18 from both sides, I get 4x equals 12, which just means x equals 3. So the coordinates are just 3, 6. This is where these two lines will intersect.